So if you're casting or hiring for character, does that mean you'd hire Kyle again?
I love Kyle. In all honesty, I don't dislike anyone. I'm just going to bring up Hannah. Many people thought I hated Hannah. I don't hate anyone.
I'm Yasmin Gagne.
I'm Josh Christensen.
And this is Most Innovative Companies Video Edition. So, Josh, what is your favorite reality TV moment from Bravo?
Oh my God. It's gonna be...
And why is it Reality Von Teese?
Reality Von Teese definitely has to be up there. I also love this moment from Real Housewives, one of the girls' trips, one that they did when they had Dorinda from Real Housewives of New York on, and she said something like, "Listen, eagles don't fly with pigeons."
That's awesome.
It's a great moment.
That's my new motto.
What's your favorite reality TV show moment?
Last season of Southern Charm, Craig Conover yelled something that I will never forget, and it was, "I'm a lawyer and a storyteller." It's one of the all-time greatest lines ever uttered on TV. I don't think you can top that. Anyway, the reason we're talking about all this is because for this week's episode of the Most Innovative Companies podcast, Josh and I talked to Frances Berwick and Captain Sandy Yan. Frances is the chairman of Bravo and Peacock Unscripted, and Captain Sandy needs no introduction. She's the star of Bravo's Below Deck Mediterranean. We talked about the growth of Bravo's reality TV empire, NBC Universal streaming strategy, and what it's like to go from yacht captain to TV star.
So this is actually an extended cut of that interview that you can only see on YouTube. But we have a bunch of other content in our Most Innovative Companies audio-only version that you can get on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or wherever you listen. So be sure to subscribe to Fast Company's YouTube page right here and the Most Innovative Companies podcast.
So, Frances, let's start at the beginning. What led you to identify unscripted reality TV as the key to Bravo's kind of transformation from a niche arts network to one of the craziest networks
I mean,
on
one of
TV?
the probably
I'll take that
most
as a compliment.
watched.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it was a journey. When I first joined the network, we didn't have any ads, and we had largely acquired movies and arts programming. And so we realized that the way into sort of getting into a sort of commercial environment would be we had to produce original content. So unscripted was the way to go. And so we started with doing series with people like Michael Moore, who did a series called The Awful Truth, where it was
Me too.
funny and provocative. And from there, we segued into other types of documentaries. We did a very intense interview show with Errol Morris. But they were all sort of along the cultural and arts programming, which was our remit in those days. And then from there, the producers of the Errol Morris show then pitched us this fabulous concept called Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. And we felt like that checked every single modern arts button, because it was food, fashion, beauty, design, and pop culture. And so we felt like this was the modern representation of the arts. And so it was a bit of a process.
When they rebooted Queer Eye, it went to Netflix. How did that happen?
That happened because Netflix came to us and said, "Can we buy the format rights?"
Gotcha.
And we jointly owned the format with the production company, and whether this is good or bad, I thought that it had had its moment and it had burned very brightly. It was a sort of like wonderfully impactful show that changed a lot of lives. And I thought we had captured lightning in a bottle. And it just goes to show you can be wrong and in all the happiest ways, because I don't think we would have rebooted it. And they did a fantastic job. And I think I love the original cast, and I think they did a great job finding a new cast. And and it carried it forward, and they did it slightly differently, but with the same production company. So,
and sorry, I interrupted you because you were talking about Queer Eye. How did it sort of grow into more of a reality empire?
That then allowed us to, because of the success of Queer Eye, and it really was a hit right out of the gate, that allowed us to then invest in doing more. And then we rapidly started to grow. And our focus in those days was it still had to be appeal to our very educated audience and be sort of culturally grounded and in the zeitgeist and sort of very much pop culture. We wanted to be talked about in the days before social media. And that, that's how far back we're going. And so we then went for shows like we picked up Project Greenlight, which had been cancelled off, I think, HBO. We picked up Project Runway.
Never forget.
And then out of those shows, we then thought this would be fun to do with food. And then we came up with Top Chef. We did a bit of celebrity poker along the way, which was really fun too. But
was that the start of the Jennifer Tilly relationship at that point?
I guess it was, because she was
on
it.
those shows.
She was.
Yeah.
So were many. We had in our first season of Celebrity Poker Showdown, we had people like Ben Affleck and David Schwimmer, and it was a real sort of thing. But again, it was very much sort of like grounded in the zeitgeist. What were people talking about? What were people doing? And then we sort of morphed from there into shows like Kathy Griffin, My Life on the D List. So we dabbled a bit in celebrity, but more than anything, we found that we actually were better and did better usually if we found our own personalities, if we found interesting people with interesting stories, and then cut to one day this guy comes in and says, hey, there's some weird stuff going on in my gated community in Coto de Casa. Do you want to do this show called Behind the Gates? And we said, that sounds interesting, let's develop it. And then out of that then came The Real Housewives of Orange County. And so it's sort of snowballed, but I think a lot of people think Bravo was an overnight success.
Yeah.
But it has been a progression, and you learn. And, there's obviously shows along the way that, we loved and didn't quite sort of make it. But more than not, one show led to another, and it all felt like a sort of pretty natural progression. And, it's been fun, and we're still hopefully creating joy. So,
Captain Sandy, were you a Bravo fan before you were cast on Med?
I was always at sea, and we have satellites, so the boat changes direction. And remember this, back in the day, it wasn't automatically tracking. So we had to physically go in and type in a different heading, because as the planet turns, the boat moves around and the satellites also move. So it was very difficult to get television. And believe it or not, television is really big on yachts. So that's no, I didn't watch Bravo.
That's a long way of saying. No,
but the reality is I love Bravo now because I didn't know about it.
So how did they find you?
A showrunner. It was a comedian who actually said, you need a woman who knew the showrunner, and Nadine. And she Googled me, and she goes, oh, my God, she's like the real deal. So I got a phone call. All my friends are saying, don't do the show. And I just thought, when a door of opportunity opens, walk through it, because you can always walk back out the door. So I tried it, and I liked it. And I love it.
I gotta say,
and we loved her.
Yeah. The below deck crews, I think, have the hardest on-camera jobs in reality television, because you actually have to drive a boat. Versus, Top Chef is also very difficult, I would say, but that's a competition.
Versus,
you're not winning money. Well, I guess you're getting paid for what you do, but you're not winning money for driving the boat better. You just have to not crash it, like Captain Jason did.
And you don't have to you're not like hosting a semi-contrived dinner party to celebrate something random.
We are in a way.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So you actually have that part. It is a 5-star floating resort. So you have the restaurant, housekeeping, entertainment. It's a resort on water.
And are you, because I imagine there's filming and then you have downtime. Are you still on a yacht during downtime?
Listen, I love boats. If I can be on a boat, I'm on a boat. People ask me, can you actually relax on a boat? I'm like, yes, try me. Yeah, I love boating.
So, Frances,
I would just say it is a perfect show from the point of view of it is organically, these people are working. They are living in the below deck part of the characters. They are living and working and in a very intense environment, and it is hard work. And so from that point of view, we do strive to be authentic and organic. It is sort of a perfect show from that point of view because these people come together and they are living together, and it's a very sort of intense experience. And then you put on that the needs of these, often quite demanding guests.
Yeah.
And we certainly don't, we definitely don't direct the primaries and their guests to be any sort of way. They come on and they have expectations because they are actually paying for the trip too. So we subsidize it a little bit. I think that's sort of no secret, but they're still paying a lot of money for this. And it's on Sandy and the team to actually deliver on what they've done. And we have to. That's sort of the expectation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Frances, you talked a little bit about Queer Eye. I love that you traced a line from Errol Morris to Queer Eye. But what were some of the early risks or bets that really paid off?
Well, Queer Eye was one of them. Project Runway was one of them. The first season, when we first launched that, it was a very, very tiny show, and we loved it so much that we took some really big bets with that, where we had aired about 3 episodes. It was not really hitting its audience, and we knew that there was a bigger audience for it because we had seen the explosion that we'd had when Queer Eye was at its sort of height. And so we took the holiday period, because it launched in December, and we just blasted the entire network. I think we had a marathon of the 3 episodes of Project Runway almost incessantly for about, the 10 days around Christmas and New Year. And then when it came back for the new episode early in January, it had doubled. The next week, it just was sort of like the power of word of mouth and a lot of sort of sheer grit to sort of like pick it up. And then it was just sort of huge. And then season 2 was sort of double that, and it just kept growing. So we knew we had something that was really good, and we believed in it. I will say the same with Queer Eye. We put the entire marketing budget for the year on that one show.
Wow.
And that was on the strength of, we really loved the pilot. It had tested very well, and we didn't have much in the way of resources. And so it was sort of like, you bet big, go big or go home, and it worked.
Tell me about how you think about building franchises. So, for example, Real Housewives started in LA. When did you decide that the right move was to bring it to other cities?
Well, it sort of happened a little by accident. And so I wouldn't say that was, a concerted. We didn't launch the Real Housewives of Orange County and think, okay, let's franchise this. We actually were developing a show called Manhattan Moms, and that's what we were pitched. And that's also part of the story of why we have different production companies working on these shows. And during production, we saw how successful Real Housewives of Orange County was. We had a whole internal debate about, was it going to tarnish Orange County if we named Manhattan Moms Real Housewives of New York, or would it be additive? And, that was then sort of like a back and forth for a number of months. We then had to persuade some of the cast that it was okay to be called Real Housewives, because you'll recall they weren't all married. And we, it was sort of like, this is just a metaphor.
Now no one's married.
And then
Anyway.
And so that became Real Housewives of New York, and we actually, and then we then strategically looked at casts in other places, but we were pitched another ensemble female cast in Atlanta that we really liked. We did our own development in New Jersey and found that wonderful family that, it was just sort of extraordinary that there's this sort of all of these interconnected friends. But it all started with, they had to be organic groups of friends. Sometimes there would be somebody who was a very good friend of one of them who would come into the group, which is what happened with Jill Zaar and inviting Bethany in. And Bethany was an outlier in that she had been on another reality show, the Martha Stewart's Apprentice. So again, we sort of weighed that. But it sort of rapidly became franchised in a small period of time, but because we were doing all this casting around sort of female ensembles.
These shows have run for a long time, Below Deck Med, including, I think you're going into your 11th season now. Is that correct?
Yeah, my 10th.
Your
the
10th
11th,
season,
yeah.
11th season overall. How do you keep that fresh going forward? I mean, I think that's part of like the remarkable thing about these Bravo reality shows is that they have such staying power.
Yeah, we pay a lot of attention to keeping them fresh, and there are lessons that we've learned of the past where you do too much, and there is such a thing as sort of fatigue.
What's an example of doing too much?
We actually had 2 or 3 years ago, we had 5 different Below Deck sort of casts. We had a Below Deck Adventure, we had Sailing Yacht, and we've actually sort of scaled that back to 3 at any one time, and we think that that's the right number and that there are enough cast and enough different stories to tell. But it just felt like too much, and we're very careful. We do a lot of international format licensing on shows like Real Housewives and Top Chef. We have decided not to do that with Below Deck because Below Deck is already a very international show, and the cast are pulled from a pool of lots of different nationalities. It's quite hard to secure the boats. You're much more familiar with that, and so and then we're very sort of careful about curating at what moment should we replace or bring in new cast members. If we want to keep telling different stories and hitting different, stages in people's lives, and that's the beauty of a show like Real Housewives is we can sort of keep refreshing the cast. In some cases, we take a bit more of a step and we'll replace the whole cast, but that's obviously sort of riskier.
Right.
And then we're, constantly looking at different ways to tell stories. You'll notice at some point we started doing much more sort of like flashbacks and flash forwards, and different sort of treatments and handling the reunions a little differently. And but it is a constant concern and something that we're very focused on. How do we keep the shows feeling fresh?
You have, and I say this as a compliment because I love this when it comes in, a remarkable hit rate when it comes to finding criminals, either before their crime or afterwards. And I'm curious how you deal with that and I suppose like why you think that happens.
Actually, it really defies all logic that if you are engaged in criminal activity, you would want to go on television because you're probably going to get worse ramifications and be set an example of. But I don't know. That is really the furthest thing that we want. It's always a surprise and a disappointment. I have no words.
It's
for
the
that.
wealth. I think when you're when you have that kind of wealth, because I work on a boat, I always Google. Before Google, I would ask, are we a floating target or should we be concerned? Should we have
floating
extra
target
security?
is so good.
But a lot of wealth brings that. And I'm not sure why, but the rules don't apply. And that's what happens. That's what I've witnessed through the years.
When you're, Captain Sandy, when you're sort of assembling a crew for a boat, how much input, you're obviously casting as well. How does that work? Like, how much input do you have? How much input does Bravo have? What does that look like?
Through the years, we've evolved together. So in the beginning, it was, what are we doing here? The yachting industry was not happy about it. We hire. So if I would hire a crew member, it would be a look, a personality, and the skill set we would teach, right? So if it was for a lead department head, of course you hire for expertise. So it's the same thing. We are there for entertainment, we're there to serve, and we're there to show a good time. So it's a perfect match. And through the years, we've evolved together where I look at the bosun to make sure they have enough experience that can handle lines and we don't crash the boat.
I really never knew how to pronounce that word until just now.
Were you saying boatswain?
Absolutely.
Well, a lot of them use boatswain. In the military, they use that.
So with that being said,
I will say there's safety too. They have to have expertise because
Sure. And remember, we
it
have
is a risky
off-camera
situation.
Yeah. And we have off-camera crew.
Yeah.
Don't worry. Everybody's safe. There's a Manning document. So
I
the
do like
flag's
how you
safe.
introduce the engineers and the
Yes.
first mates at the beginning of the
Yeah.
season, and then you hardly ever see them
Yeah.
again because I assume they're
The
doing a
insurance
lot of
company
work, especially
mandates
the engineers.
it.
Yeah.
We're protected.
And sometimes we do have to show them when things break down in the right. I
Oh my
remember
gosh, we lost the toilets for 9 hours on a charter.
really?
That was
Yeah.
Morocco and Gulf Juan. I'll never forget in South France. And it's like, can you imagine 30-something people?
I mean, if you've been on a Carnival cruise line, you probably have experienced this. I do have to say, I think you found the most delightful person to be your chief stew. I do not love anyone on reality TV more than Aisha Scott, who's absolutely delightful.
Yeah.
My wife has a sweatshirt that says, "That's terrible."
Yeah, I love when she says the dock. It's like the deck, the dick. You're like, what are you saying?
Yeah, she really is sunshine.
She is. She's really like that. She doesn't.
Yeah.
She doesn't hate.
Yeah.
She's not that.
So speaking of launching new shows, Bravo announced it's ordering a bunch of new series for the upcoming year. Real Housewives of Rhode Island. I know Josh is.
I'm
Josh
going
actually-
to know people
Josh
on
is
this
actually
show.
a
I
cast
told
member
you this.
of Real Housewives
I'm
of Rhode
from
Island.
Providence, Rhode Island. People who listen to this show know that. I'm sure I know people on the
I
show
can't
at least.
wait to hear
Yeah.
what you think of it.
Oh my God. Yeah, I will be sure to email you what I think and be like, that's my cousin that's on the show.
Then there's Ladies of London, The Valley Persian Style, which sounds like Shahs of Sunset,
Yeah.
which was good. Wife Swap, The Real Housewives edition, which I think is going to be amazing.
Wife Swap Real Housewives edition.
but
Sounds so fun.
Tell us a bit about these shows and tell us, why now's the right time to greenlight them, what all that looks like.
Well, I think number one, it speaks to we're still investing in this brand in a sea of a lot of de-investment in cable networks. We still really believe in Bravo, and we are sort of investing, and we believe in launching new and reimagining former shows and bringing them back. And so we're really excited about this slate. The Rhode Island cast is great. Very excited. Felt like time. We didn't sort of set out to think, okay, where on the map does it need to be? It's all about, at any one time, we do a lot of casting around the country, and this was just a great cast, and they do all know each other, and we love this concept of Rhode Island famous, which apparently is a thing. It's a small state, and so a lot of people know a lot of people in the state.
Yeah.
The Wife Swap, the Housewives edition, that's a bit of a departure for us because usually, we create the formats.
Yeah.
This is one where we license the format. It was owned by the same production company as produces some of our Housewives shows. Truly original. And we decided to take 4 housewives, and we're going to put them completely out of their element into experiences that they probably haven't had before. And we think that we've got a great selection. And I can't say more than that because it's in production right now, and I don't want to give anyone any spoilers about what might await them. But we're excited for that. And then you're not completely wrong. The Valley, the show that is currently airing, did incredibly well for us. It was one of our best performing new shows. It was obviously something of a spin-off from Vanderpump Rules with some of those former cast members. And this season, we see even more of the former Vanderpump cast members in there. We decided that we have some shows where we're following people in their 20s and 30s, and they're not really adulting.
Yeah.
And the Valley is really our way into what's that next life stage. And we've done really well with the cast that we have. But then we found another pocket of the Valley where we have other people who are now buying homes, having kids, and some of whom know each other from having done a show that you just referred to. And so excited to bring them back and introduce some of their sort of circle of friends.
Now, how do you think about moving familiar faces around? You know what I mean? So you mentioned Vanderpump in the Valley. You know, sometimes a character's on one show and then their role on that show gets minimized but augmented somewhere else. What does that sort of casting process look like?
Well, I think as long as our cast members are still willing to tell their stories, and this requires a lot of them. They have to be authentic and vulnerable and really be prepared to share their whole lives with people. And our fans are really passionate, and if they don't feel that authenticity, or if they feel that the cast members are holding things back, they'll be quite vocal about it, and they'll also sort of turn away from them. And so, but when we have personalities who are very unfiltered and who want to keep sharing their lives, we're very happy to, and where the audience still really wants to follow them. And invariably, many of our viewers, and Sandy's experienced this, they think of our talent, of our personalities as friends, that they are people that they have, spent a lot of time with and understand their motivations and want to spend more time with. And so we'll put them on other series where that makes sense. But it has to be, they have to really want to do it.
Yeah.
How do you think about that parasocial relationship, particularly, I mean, you're a captain, you didn't come from this world.
It was a shocker for me in the beginning, because what happens is when you're watching an actor act, they know they're acting. But when you're doing reality TV, they feel like you're their best friend.
Yeah.
So they'll come and sit at your table. And I've learned over the years how to politely say, oh my gosh, this is so great to meet you. Let's walk back to your friends and let's see your friends and take pictures. It is incredible. And the amount of messages that we get for our show is, how can I get my kids into this job? I love your show. Where can I go charter? Bravo's changed our entire industry, and it's put us on the map for people, everyday people, because you can afford to charter. It doesn't have to be a massive super yacht. There are so many boats out there. I was on an airplane. A family said, we're going to Croatia for the first time because we're also a travel show because of your show. And so it reaches many, many people, and it makes it a reality for them. And then they call us for advice. What should they do? Where should they go? What boat should they choose? And it's incredible. And when you see how happy they are to see you, it isn't like they're angry and they don't like you. They hug you. They come in for hugs. And because of the show, I do a lot of corporate speaking. Yeah. And after this, I'm going to Charlotte to speak for 450 people. Someone's dressing up like Captain Sandy. And they, although it's, navigating troubled waters in the real estate industry, they also want to know a lot about what it's like.
Yeah.
So they really want to know. And that's fascinating to me. So I know people hire me because they watch the show. I am there because they watch the show. Because before that, the only place I ever spoke was at boat shows.
Which sounds great. I would love to go and speak at a boat show. But yeah, you've been able to you've been able to make a lot of different impacts that you probably never thought that you would be able to. I believe you're involved with a not-for-profit.
Yes. I have a charity, and I was just sharing with Frances yesterday to get an in-school curriculum, because I was the kid that was on that drug and alcohol merry-go-round. I got sober. I got off the merry-go-round, and I got kicked out of 11th grade. I was always in trouble. And the maritime industry took me. And I became a yacht captain. I became trustworthy. It was incredible. So I have thousands of people that ask me, how can they get their kids into this industry? In public schools, people in middle America deserve to be able to have a career as well at sea. And there's land-based jobs and sea-based jobs. So I created this curriculum for the state of Florida. Now we just want to take it nationwide. And that's raising the money for that.
So, Frances, something that I actually just listened to a book by Helen Lewis, a New Yorker writer, about the history of reality TV. And something that struck me in the book is obviously, and you see this in Bravo, social media conversation becomes part of the shows in kind of a weird way, because there's a lot of rumors about things that aren't shown on camera. I mean, at reunions, Andy Cohen will
This interview could be clipped and shown on Watch What Happens Live.
Exactly. How do you...
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
Hopefully not. That means something went wrong for you two.
how do you think about that, as the production's rolling? How do you sort of fit that in? What are those conversations like?
Well, we've had to navigate around that. There have, and these are, more lessons learned. If we now know we can't tape an ongoing show when that current cycle is on the air. We have tried that, and it gets really sort of confusing because the cast members start reacting to things that they see is being said about them or happening on the show, and then it becomes very sort of meta. It's not just, there's not just the chatter on social. It ends up coming into the next season.
Yeah.
And, often that can be a very, number one, a tedious storyline, but very, very confusing too. So we try and sort of make sure that we've wrapped airing the show before we start production on the next season. Sometimes, the social piece is part and parcel. It's good and bad. Sometimes it gets out of control, and we try and sort of manage it. But it's the instant gratification for cast members. But it's also got some negative things too. So.
That happened to me, and with Hannah, I watched an episode before I got on the show. And I saw her style of service, and I was like, oh, no, that can't happen. Because I come from an industry where each boat competes for the client. So I confronted Hannah, and watching that episode totally changed my way of thinking.
Yeah, that's hard. Do you read Reddit threads or social media comments about yourself? What is that experience like? Does it get to you sometimes?
In the beginning, it did. But then I just realized they don't know me. So in the beginning, it was terrible. My first year, thank God for Bravo PR, because they really talk you off the cliff. And I'm not a reactor. I've never been a reactor. So I pause. I wait 24 hours before I answer anything that disturbs me emotionally. And now I just read it and laugh. I actually use it for material when I speak.
Oh, I
like show
that.
the mean tweets. It's really fun.
Cool. What is and you can say no to answering this question, but what is the social media post that got to you the most?
That I hated Hannah. Like that I just didn't want her to succeed, and that's not true. I want everyone to succeed. I'm there for them. I'm there to help them in their career. That's why I'm a captain.
As I went back ahead of this interview and watched really early Bravo shows until now, and it did strike me as is like, I think this should have been expected, but people don't know that they're on camera as much, right? Like there's a lot of people eating a ton on screen. As people have understood what reality shows are, how do you think about the casting process? Because my guess is you don't want people who, are just kind of acting for the camera. You want some level of authenticity, but you also want people who do understand what the deal is, right?
Yeah, well, I think we actually still have some people coming on some of our shows where they really haven't seen it at all. I will say that hilariously, we have a dating show with 4 of our housewives right now called Bravo Love Hotel, and we had some of those daters who they had literally have never watched Real Housewives and didn't know what it was, but they were happy to come on this dating show. So props to them. But it's we need people who are going to be unfiltered and authentic, and if we'll tape, and usually when we start taping a show, we throw away the first few days anyway, because you can then weed out anyone who's sort of like playing for the camera. Right. But ultimately, you want people's real personalities to come through, or the audience isn't going to connect with them and buy into them. And so if we're not seeing that, then we tend to sort of minimize that person's storyline, because it's just sort of like not reading authentically. So, yeah, we think about that a lot. It is funny, and, I saw Andy pointed out recently, often on season 2, people will get the, the glow up,
Yeah,
whatever.
I've noticed that too.
Because
It's like
they've seen
Botox
themselves
time.
on screen. But I think that's no dissimilar to when we all started using Zoom. And it's like, okay, we're not going on camera without mascara on.
Yeah, because you see yourself being filmed, and even me, even my behavior. So when I got really angry, I wasn't happy with myself. You know, yes, I changed. I completely changed because, and if you had cameras in your house and you watched how you treated each other, I'm sure you would also change.
I mean, we have to watch ourselves sometimes in social media clips. It's already difficult.
On a much smaller scale, obviously. But like I wore a black shirt forgetting we had a black background today because I felt bloated this morning and I didn't want to look heavier on camera. So I screwed up Vanessa and Bill's job here. But like that self-consciousness is very real. I cannot imagine what it's like to then be on a Bravo reality TV show with millions and millions of people watching.
And anonymous people can be really harsh and mean and they'll say stuff. But yes, the fashion, I do think the fashion has got more heightened. You look at those early seasons of Orange County and they're all wearing what used to be called the sky top, that halter, sleeveless halter top. And so I think that's changed. But we actually really don't want people to change too much. We want them to be themselves. But, you know, invariably now, you know, all the interviews, the pickup interviews are full hair and makeup. And
You know, we talked about a little bit about sort of crime on the show, but I also think there's a lot of instances that are controversial but not necessarily criminal. And I would give you an example as like Monica on Real Housewives of Salt Lake City and her Instagram account. And I'm curious how you deal with that in terms of finding the line of when to keep a cast member on, when it's time to kick them off. You know what I mean? What those conversations are like.
well, sometimes it happens naturally where if we've got a whole cast who won't film with somebody,
Right.
then you can't bring them back because otherwise you're just following a solo storyline, and that's not what the show is. In some cases, people do cross a line for, you know, our company values, and we want our production sets to reflect, you know, how we work as a business, and so we'll be focused on that. So it really sort of varies, and obviously there's lots of gray area. You know, I will say that one of the things about these shows, people redeem themselves, and there's a lot of, you know, we put people on television who are flawed, as we all are, and those flaws are manifest when you, number one, put it on television, and then it's part of a promo, and it's used as the tease for the next episode, and so it becomes sort of more heightened. But those flaws aren't criminal, right?
Yeah.
They're just, you know, and we want to give people a bit of grace in terms of they should get some forgiveness and be able to sort of move on. And there are, you know, I'm happy to say that there are talent that we've had on the show where they'll have a, you know, what they refer to as a bad season where, you know, they didn't get on well with their cast members, and then without changing their personality, they may then sort of redeem themselves by other actions. But I think more than anything, the critical thing is they have to be relatable to viewers.
Yeah. And
oftentimes viewers will say, "Oh, you clearly felt bad for having done that," and it's, you know, and it makes them more relatable to the
I think
audience.
we've seen that at some reunions. I will say, though, there have been times, I would say, you know, on Southern Charm, for example, where someone clearly has an addiction problem, for instance, and that's, you know, been called out by Andy Cohen. And at what point do you say, is it still responsible for this network to keep them on air? Does that make sense?
No, it totally does. And there have been times when we've actually said to cast members, you know, we're not going to film with you. We're also much more careful on our productions with alcohol consumption than we were a few years ago. And that is definitely something that we have shifted on, and we have people sort of monitoring that. But we have been sort of more intrusive than not on that. But often it will be their friends or their, you know, essentially their cast members who will hold them accountable as in real life.
Yeah. I see you nodding, Captain Sanders.
Well, I just,
noticed
because I'm in recovery. it's hard because for that person, they're trying. And then when, I don't think TV creates addiction at all.
Yeah.
But when you put that hard line and they still do it, then okay, they need some help. I think it would be really cool to see that person being taken to a treatment center as part of that and then coming back on the show, which could be really cool for them. And the other part is my scene with Travis, same thing. I could tell the kid has a problem. And I asked production to not film it because I wanted to talk to him, but they did. And it's great that they did. His father reached out to me. Travis was grateful. So many people reached out and thought it was a wonderful thing. And, he's doing really well today. Sometimes just a conversation actually changes someone. But it's wonderful that, and yes, Bravo doesn't pour alcohol down people's throat. Like that never was the case on our show. They have a choice to drink or not.
Yeah.
And they don't pay for their alcohol. They only pay for their food. So the drinks are on them. And it's so interesting because I remember one season they left a big bill and the cast members had to pay it.
Yeah.
Bravo's like, I'm not paying for the bill, or the production company. And so, yeah, that's misleading when you hear things like that because that is not the case.
But I think we can just use the platform, though, that we have. I don't know if you saw the last season of Real Housewives of Salt Lake City.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up, the Robert Cosby and Mary Cosby situation, which I think a lot of people thought was very powerful and helpful. I think that's it's a line you walk, right?
Yes.
Because there's voyeurism and then there is authenticity.
Yes, exactly. And we would not have done that were they both not very, very prepared to do it and both felt like there would be some value to other people to do it. But that's obviously sort of incredibly painful. In the Valley, we do actually follow a friend dropping off, who's also a cast member, dropping off another cast member into rehab. And that is also sort of, that's a journey that he's on, that he was prepared to sort of, do that on camera.
Now let's talk about BravoCon. Captain Sandy, what is
my favorite
what is it
time
like
of the
for
year?
you?
It's incredible. You walk up there, the energy behind it, what Bravo puts into it, NBC as a whole, it's just fantastic. To be a part of that is a statement like, wow, we're actually entertaining people, changing lives, and they're all going to come here at once to see us. So bringing that energy for the fans is a responsibility. And I told Frances yesterday, I watched our very first BravoCon. It was very cold and raining in New York City, and these people were freezing, and the line was a mile long. And she said, could you please, it was a group of us, just go out and say thank you, hi, how are you, and walk the line. And I thought, that's when she became my superhero, because I was like, she cares. And so we did, and just watching how they will stand in the freezing cold. They will stand in the heat just to see us. So it is incredible. And the city comes alive. And Vegas is epic.
It was incredible that you did that. You had to go out in the freezing cold. We try not to make them stand in the freezing cold. That was the very first BravoCon in 2019, and we definitely had some teething problems. But
how does BravoCon fit into your overall business strategy? How important is it for the brand? How are you thinking of expanding it? Tell me about that.
It's super important. So, our fans are incredibly passionate, incredibly loyal. They want the connection to the talent. And most importantly, they want there's some sort of wonderful alchemy of a community of people who all love the same content. And in a world where I think, and we've done research into this, people are saying that they are lonelier than they've ever been. They are craving that connection and that community. And it is one way where they all sort of come together with their sort of shared love of Bravo, which is a really sort of like incredibly gratifying, but also sort of like a testament to the talent and and how much the talent puts out. So it is really important to the brand. This is our way of both giving back, getting the talent closer to the fans, and then actually getting some feedback from the fans too. So it's a very nice experience. I will say we did the first one in 2019. It was about 9,000 or 10,000 people, sold out, both ticket sales sold out in, I think, under a minute each.
Wow.
Then we had a couple of years because of that thing called COVID, and then really sort of scaled it. We did one in New York at the Javits Convention Center, and then we moved it to Vegas, which is really sort of set up and equipped to sort of hold a convention like that. And it worked really well. And, I'm really happy that every time we've done it, we've had over an 80% response rate of this was one of the best weekends of their lives. And, some people even went on to say, after my wedding or after the birth of my kid, this was, and it was sort of like, that's really wonderful. And it is a big undertaking. It's a lot that we ask of the talent. But I think it is just so joyous, and it's just a very happy experience. So it is incredibly important, and it kind of came out of it was about 10 years in the making. We kept thinking of doing it, but it came out of our sort of old, when Bravo did its own advertising upfronts, it was sort of like a really big ticket to get invited to them, because we would have all of our talent in one room, and so we would have a sort of matchmaker side, and we would have a styling thing for Project Runway and the Housewives, and it was a really sort of popular event.
It's a culture, and it's so cool to be a part of it.
I'll preface this by saying, Captain Sandy, maybe this is your moment to ask for a raise. But we have seen some activity. I think Bethany Frankel's been really vocal about wanting more compensation for shows. We've seen talks about unionization of cast members. How do you think about that? How would you respond to that? How do you sort of talk to cast members about their compensation? What does that look like?
Well, I think we compensate well, and we sort of maintain. I like to think that we hopefully exceed in terms of all the sort of production protocols and policies, what they would have access to otherwise. And, I really sort of question the advantages of that from the point of view of, we have, on a show like Below Deck, you've got people who come on the show for one season. They're not actors. They don't want to be actors. That seems like they should be compensated for this show, as opposed to paying dues into a union for something that they may not, they want to be bosuns or deckhands or whatever it is.
Can I speak to this?
Yeah.
Okay, so I work for very wealthy people, and there is a range, right? So as a captain on a certain size vessel, you make a certain amount of money. And then when you charter, you have your tips. So they don't take taxes out. You have to pay your own taxes. I think it's the same in entertainment. When I go as a cast member, and I'll never forget, when I first started, it was very low. Then I thought, I'm a federally licensed captain. I take a lot of risk. I'm not just a cast member. I take risk. So I had a conversation with Sherry Levine at the time, and I just said, listen, I'm not asking for the bank. I've learned how to negotiate through the years, working for very wealthy people. And I sit across from billionaires, and we have a conversation, and I write down what I think is fair, and he looks at it, he goes, well, that's great, Sandy. That we could do this. And he goes, let's send it to the lawyer. My thing is, when attorneys start to try to negotiate, that's where for me, it's difficult. I would rather have the conversation and say what's fair, because I believe that if you're too greedy, you're going to greed yourself right out of a job. And I've seen that in my industry. And I don't care what industry you're in, people care about making money. And that's really the bottom line. It goes up and up and up to the top. They have to meet their quota. And I remember hearing my boss, he owned a bank, and all their conversations always happened on the bridge, and he'd say, shave 5% of the non-performers. In my mind, I was like, I better perform and make this man money. And so I asked him, I go, do you do that every year? He goes, every year. He shaves 5%. So it's business. And you can't, just because you're filming, it doesn't change. The laws don't change a profit. And that's something people just have to learn. and it has to be fair.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Captain Sandy, what are your favorite Bravo shows?
To be honest, Below Deck, because I get to watch.
Man, you just love boats.
Yeah, I love boats.
It's
And
just-
the boat Jason's on now, I'm just trying to figure out. I've never seen that boat because in my business, we know every boat that
Yeah.
floats. I love the show. Leah loves the Housewives. Oh my gosh, it is all the time. So I know everything about the Housewives. And by just walking through the house, I go, how can you listen to them yelling?
Yeah, I know.
Like
That's
they're
how I
screaming
feel.
all the
I love
time.
it
I
so
don't get
much.
it.
They're not screaming all the time.
A lot.
There's a
They're
lot of
screaming a
fun
lot.
too.
Yeah, they have fun. Crappy Lake's really funny. Like that's a
Crabby
great
Lake
show.
is very funny.
Yeah.
Frances, I know this is like asking you to choose from your children, but what is your favorite?
Oh, it varies, from season to
Since season.
season. Of the shows coming up, I really like Next Gen NYC, which we're launching in June.
Is that the one with like Magic Johnson's kid or something?
Oh,
No.
this is,
Damon Dash.
Damon
has
Dash. There's
Some
Magic Johnson's kid.
some offspring, grown-up kids of some of our
Right,
Real
yeah.
Housewives.
Brooks from Salt Lake City.
Brooks
Mhm.
Marks,
On it, yeah.
who's Meredith's son, and then it's some other kids who they are all friends with.
The Judice kids is on it. It was
Gia,
right? Gia.
Gia Judice.
Are they all above 18?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
they're
because
all
I
they're
imagine
all in,
negotiations with younger kids.
they're all
yeah.
in their 20s actually.
That makes sense. Have you ever watched NYC Prep? One
No,
season.
I had no
Did
idea
you
what
work
that
on? Was that a
is.
Bravo? Yeah. It's so crazy.
Oh my God, yeah. No. Nope,
It's-
never watched that one.
It is a cult classic.
Yeah, it's a cult
Yes.
class. They found some,
Yeah.
it was like an attempt to make Gossip Girl in real life. So they found some kids at New York prep schools.
Interesting. That
And
sounds tough.
Both prep and public schools. We had a mix.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I moved to New York, I was like, where did these people go to school? And I did go on a Where Are They Now page on the internet. Some of them have very private lives now, it turns out.
Well, that's a great note to end it on, I think.
yeah.
You can
Thank you
still watch
so-
it on Peacock. How about that?
Oh, you
for a
can?
plug? Yes.
Oh my God.
Well, I know what
Yes.
I'm doing tonight.
Make it again. Make it again.
I think we're trying to go a little older than that. We like casts
Yeah.
20-something and up. Can I just say, obviously, Bravo's a linear network, but on Peacock, and that's where we've actually seen
Yeah.
a lot of our growth.
Are you
Reasoning.
carrying Peacock on your back? I feel like you are.
Is Bravo carrying?
Yeah.
No, but it is an important piece of the mix, and the Bravo cohort, as we call them, they watch a lot. And
Do you
so,
see-
and a lot of other Peacock content as well as the Bravo shows. So they are it's
Do you see more
important.
people sort of looking at your shows as appointment viewing through linear TV, or do you see people binging at this point?
both. We actually find that the weekly drop is still very much sort of like destination, and that whole sort of social chatter that comes with the sort of like weekly viewing is important. And then there are other people who want to sort of like binge watch it on a Saturday afternoon and catch up with sort of like 4 episodes in one go.
Yeah.
So it's, I think that that's the beauty of how we can, offer it up. It's, works for everyone.
Do you all have a favorite reality show that is not Bravo?
I mean, I have
No.
shows that I enjoy. Do you have any?
Leah likes the Kardashians. Like I'm going with Leah because I honestly don't have time to watch TV.
Yeah, you're on a boat.
No, I'm outside. Like I love being outside on
Yeah.
a boat at the beach. But Leah, yeah, she likes.
I don't know.
I mean, I enjoy some of those sort of the big reality shows, the Survivors and the
90
Dancing
Day
with
Fiancé.
Oh yeah,
Stars.
Naked and
Yes.
Afraid. I have watched that a few
Naked-
times.
Oh, yeah.
I don't
That
understand
is a
how they
great
just
one.
can do that.
Oh, that's wild. I'm
Well,
mostly
it-
concerned about ants.
Yes.
Well, I think that's a great place to end it, Josh.
Thank you both.
Thank you
for
both
being
so
on
much
the
for
very
being
show.
on the show. This was great.
Thank you.